Today's Sports Spectrum interview was pre-recorded prior to the coronavirus outbreak.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with longtime NHL player Shane Doan is brought to you by International Justice Mission. We love having them as partners and working with them and believe in what they stand for in helping to fight and end slavery. They're helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide, and you and I can get involved in helping them with the fight. Check out ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and learn about how you and I can help end slavery today. Shane Doan is our guest today on Sports Spectrum, selected 7th overall back in 1995 in the NHL Draft by the Winnipeg Jets, the old Winnipeg Jets, and he played in the NHL for 22 years, from 1995 to 2017. What a career. He played with Winnipeg that first season in 95-96, and then that team, that franchise, moved to Phoenix and became the Phoenix Coyotes, now the Arizona Coyotes, and they've been there, and he's been there since 1996 and retired 3 years ago in 2017. 21 NHL seasons for Shane Doan, two-time NHL All-Star, 2012 Mark Messier Leadership Award, and in February of 2019, Shane's number 19 was retired by the Coyotes before a game against, ironically, the current Winnipeg Jets. Shane holds the Coyotes and the Jets records for games played, career points, career goals, and many, many other records, having played 21 NHL seasons. He's also a man of God. He loves the Lord, and he tells his story and his testimony in a beautiful way today on the podcast. Take a listen to Shane Doan joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Shane Doan, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So good to talk to you, Shane. Now, it's been, I believe, 3 seasons since you've been retired, finishing up after the 2016-2017 season. Tell me about sort of post-retirement and what that adjustment was like for you. I remember when you penned sort of a goodbye note. I think it ran in the local newspaper and online. You talked about the difficult decision to retire. How has that been now when you're looking back 3 years later?
Well, I think it's always going to be difficult. I think as a player, there's nothing like getting the opportunity to play in a game, and the joy of playing the game and the love of the game is always there. And so I think that's probably the most difficult part of it. But it was definitely the right time, and made the most sense. And I'm very comfortable and content with my decision. I was very just trying to figure out if it was what I really wanted, and it turned out to be a great decision, even though I still miss a game and miss playing a ton, because it's just such a great game.
No, of course. And I remember reading, and you said it was one of the hardest decisions you've ever made, but you also said prayer was vital in making that decision. Why was it so important to have prayer become a part? And we're going to talk about your journey of faith in a minute, but just that idea of praying with your wife, seeking the Lord to make that decision, which, like you said, was one of the hardest decisions you had to make.
You know what? It's the it's the idea of having a peace and being content, and not being an emotional or a reactionary decision. And understanding that there's a plan and that there's something more to your life than just you, and understanding that, just getting that understanding. And I think that through prayer and through your relationship with God, I think that is, I mean, it's really the thing that kind of guides you the most. And it's not like I didn't hear like, okay, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. I know some people have had that. There was a peace that came with it. And as I was, I guess, willing to try to be still and listen, and there was a peace that came with it. And not one that I was, I think, eager to accept at first, but then knew that it was the right decision just through that peace.
Was watching that first game the following season, I guess that would have been the 2017 fall of 2017. Was that difficult?
You know what? It wasn't as bad watching the first game. It was traveling by myself for the first time. That was probably one of the harder things, because everything I'd ever done has always been as a team. I'd watched games before, whether you're hurt or different things like that. But when you travel during the season for the first time, I remember I flew from Phoenix to Toronto and was kind of going into the city, and I was riding on a plane by myself, and the guy next to me asked what I was coming to do. And I remember for the first time being like, oh my goodness, I'm on my own here. Like I don't have my team with me. I don't have my guys with me. I don't have the surrounding of everybody that kind of that insulated you and made you feel like you're part of something with you. And that was probably the hardest part, the hardest thing that I went through early on. That and then when playoffs started, I hated the one watching the playoffs. But unfortunately, I got to do that way too much anyways at the end of my career. So
that's fair.
I was okay with it by that time.
Shane Doan's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Hockey was always in your blood, wasn't it? Like from the time you came basically out of the womb, your dad was a pro hockey player. That was just embedded in you from the beginning, wasn't it?
There's definitely an element in my family. My joke is in my family, you're either a hockey player or a cowboy, and I wasn't tough enough to be a cowboy, so I had to be a hockey player. So, but yeah, that's kind of, my dad played, my uncles played, those are my mom's brothers, they all played, and my dad played. So it was kind of on both sides of my family, and all my cousins were playing when I was one of the younger ones, and so when I got an opportunity to do it, I was pretty excited.
When did you realize I'm pretty good at this thing? I can make it. I got a shot here.
Oh, well, I grew up in a really, really small town. So, you know, I could compete with most of the kids in my town. And I thought, oh, that made me pretty good. And then when I left my hometown and went to play in Kamloops in the junior hockey, I was like, this is a lot harder than I thought. And so there was an element of that I was like, oh, I don't know if this was a good idea. Am I going to be able to do this? And then I don't know if I ever got to the point where I was like, I'm pretty good at this. I think every single year when the season would start, you'd hope that this wasn't the year that I forgot everything. And then as the year would go on, you'd kind of get to that spot where it'd be like, oh, okay, I can play and I'm going to be all right. But it was always that angle. Yeah, I just am so impressed with the other players and how good they are that it was always intimidating.
As we intersect our conversation into the faith world, tell us about that. Was faith always a part of your life as a child growing up, or did that really start to take shape for you as you got older?
No, that was a huge, huge part of my family and growing up. My parents are both ordained ministers. We were the hired help on a ranch called Circle Square. It's kind of a dude ranch for kids, a non-denominational Bible camp. And, it was on my grandparents actually donated the land so that they could build or my uncle, my grandparents donated the land so they could build the ranch on their property. And then my dad moved kind of back to the hometown area to help build it. And then, was just going to stay for 2 years, and it's been 43 years and they're still there and helping out and doing what they can to help others. And so I was very, very fortunate to have an incredible faith-based family kind of environment that truly, I mean, for everything that I've been given as a person, the family that I was given is absolutely, I mean, it's perfect, as close to it as you can get. They're amazing people and yet as far from perfect as you can get as well. So it was just, I was very, very blessed. Both my mom and dad are amazing influences on my life spiritually and athletically and everything. So I was pretty fortunate to have that type of base growing up.
With a lot of the athletes that we talk to here on this show, they do grow up in Christian homes or faith-based homes, but yet that faith still has to become your own. You can only rely on your parents' faith for so long. So where does it begin to become Shane Doan's faith and not Shane Doan's faith from his parents' faith?
That's kind of where it goes from being in my head to being in my heart. I mean, that was where, you know what, that was, I had a great childhood. I asked Christ into my heart at a really young age, was understood, and my mom and dad were incredible teachers, godly men and women that showed me examples of what God is and his forgiveness and his grace. And I kind of understood it and got it. And, but at the same time, I think that we all have to kind of realize that this is a real thing, and this isn't something that you just told about and talked about, but that you have to kind of live it yourself. And when I left home at 16, that was tough. And I went from a town of 75 people, and I lived on gravel roads 8 miles from town and was pretty sheltered, to Kamloops, and kind of wasn't like I did anything that anybody that was really that bad. I just did a good job of kind of making sure everyone thought that I was kind of one way, and wasn't exactly fully that way in my thoughts and in my mind and in some of my actions. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that kind of had that understanding of like, okay, this is something that I need to make sure that it's mine and not my parents', and I need to stand up and be accountable for who I am as a person. And that took a lot of growing. I was probably about 18, 19 till about 22, 23, where I was trying to figure my own identity out, and I'm sure thankful for grace.
Well, that identity intersects with you getting selected in the 95 draft, 7th overall, by the old Winnipeg Jets franchise, and you play one season there and then move to Phoenix with the Coyotes. And just thinking through that time frame as you're trying to establish yourself as a hockey player and make it to the NHL. And I know there was a couple seasons where you were with the AHL and then back to the NHL, and just trying to figure out that world. And it sounds like that's an intersection of trying to figure out your whole identity as a man of faith too. Can you kind of take us back to that time when you're 18, 19 and just making your NHL debut and trying to figure out what the heck's going on?
Yeah, for sure. I played as an 18-year-old and as a 19-year-old. And then in my third year in the league, my contract was, they wanted to send me down to save some money, and thought that was a good idea, which kind of rocked my world a little bit, and trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Yeah. You kind of view professional sports through an ideology that is like, it's the best players all the time. And then you realize, well, this is quite a bit of a business, and it takes a little bit, you become a little cynical. And then as you come out of that, you kind of start enjoying it again. And, but at the same time as all that's going on, I'd gotten married and had a wife and a kid, and have an amazing daughter she's 21 now, and we're just an amazing girl. But I was just kind of becoming a husband and a dad and a man, and realizing that there were some things that I had to deal with. And at 18, 19 in the NHL, you can get kind of sideways on some thoughts and some processes. And then without a doubt, that was a little difficult. But at the same time, I was pretty fortunate to have the right people around me that just continued to love me through all that. And as I kind of came through that, I started to realize how this isn't something that you just say, but it's something that you live, and it's not something that you can talk about, but it's something that you have to do, and that the Bible is real, and that it is, the truths that are in the Bible are truths for a reason. It's not because your parents said it, or a preacher said it, or a pastor said it, but because they're real and they're true. And I think when that started to become a reality to me is when it really started to become my own personal belief system. And that's where I think that the importance, and when it starts to become that, then you have an opportunity to be who you are.
We'll get back to our conversation with Shane Doan in just a moment, but I want to take a second to share with you a bit about the International Justice Mission, an organization that I care about so much. And what many do not realize is that violence is a threat to people around the world who are poor. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, or homelessness, and it's often overlooked. But that is not the case with the International Justice Mission. With IJM, we believe that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. And by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. And they can't do it by themselves, and that's why I'm reaching out to you and telling you about IJM so that you'll consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. Freedom Partners are some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice, and their support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they are fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing, and I'd encourage you to join me in being a Freedom Partner today. Here's how. Go to the website, ijm.org/TF. ijm.org/TF. Join the fight and help us end slavery in our lifetime by going to the website and becoming a Freedom Partner today. Let's get back to our conversation with Shane Doan, longtime NHL player, 21 seasons in the NHL, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Do you remember that sort of welcome to the NHL moment for you? I'm sure coming into the NHL, it's 95, 96. There's still a lot of great players. I think Gretzky was still around. He might have retired by then, but Messier, a lot of great players. Yager, just thinking of Teemu Selanne and all these guys that were playing in the 90s, and Patrick Roy and the Avalanche winning titles. What was your sort of NHL, welcome to the NHL moment back in those mid-90s years?
Yeah, my first two games, and my first game was at home against Dallas, and then my second game was in New York against the Rangers. Mm-hmm. And I grew up when Wayne definitely was still in the league. He retired in '99.
Okay.
And but my first real big kind of old boy moment was I taking warm up in Madison Square Garden, and Messier was obviously, being from Alberta and I was an Oilers fan, was an icon that's, bigger than life.
Right.
And to watch him be stretching kind of on his bench or kind of leaning on his bench, being like 15, 20 feet away from me as I was kind of getting warmed up, I was like, holy cow, that's Mark Messier.
Yeah.
That's Moose. Like, that's everyone that, as a Oilers fan, and he has an air and a presence about him that's pretty heavy. And so to be on the ice, that was one of the big moments. And then after that, we played New York, and then we went to New Jersey, and I got to, because I was one of the top higher ranked prospects, I got to go with the prospects, they take you to the Stanley Cup Finals. So the year before, I got to go to the finals, and I watched when New Jersey played Detroit in the finals and won 4 straight. And
yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm playing against the Stanley Cup champions now. And Scott Stevens, and I knew Scotty Niedermayer, I'd met him, but their whole, everything about the Russian Five and all of that was pretty impressive to watch, those guys play and deal with everything that the Stanley Cup Finals have with Detroit and in New Jersey.
What about as you got older in those moments? I know your first All-Star game was 2004, playing in an All-Star game around the best players. 2009, you were a second-time All-Star. What about as you got older and you started to, become a quote-unquote veteran of the NHL, and you played a long time, so you could have called yourself a veteran for like 12 years in the amount of time that you played. But what about as you matured and grew into becoming an NHL player? Did it ever get old, or was it still this, pinch me, man, look what I get to do for a living?
Oh, no, it was always pinch me.
Yeah.
It goes back to, I think I view the players that I got to play with as they were so good, and the guys that I got to hang out with, like, I was such a huge fan of hockey and of the NHL and then never in my wildest dreams did I ever get to think that NHL players would be my good friends. And when I was playing, I mean, I got to be friends with the greatest players and to play hockey. And that's something that I never really got used to, because they're just guys that I admire so much. And I didn't care how old you were or whatever, if you're playing in the NHL and having success. And I got to kind of meet them and introduce myself to them. It was always something that was pretty special to see how talented and how those guys were, and to realize that, man, they're exactly like me. It was the most encouraging thing was to be like, holy, they're just total ordinary guys. Like, that's all it is, which is like so encouraging and discouraging, because it's like, man, I thought they were going to be like these superheroes that were like, could do anything and everything was perfect and the sun shined on them all the time. And when you get to see them and meet them and realize that, oh, they go through the same things as us, that was tough and it was difficult to realize. But then it was kind of encouraging to realize at the same time. And that was something that to the day I retired, and even now when I talk to guys, I'm always so excited to hang out and talk to different players and the guys that are good men that I enjoy being around.
You talked about your faith journey kind of really taking shape between 18 and 22, but you still played a long time. You were into into 40 years old or so when you retired. So tell us about that faith journey as an NHL player. You don't see it as something, at least from my perspective, and I'm a fan of the NHL, where you don't see players who are maybe as open about their faith as sports like maybe the NFL or Major League Baseball. Certainly in the NFL, they have the 50-yard line huddle and things like that. What was your faith experience like in your 20 years in the NHL?
You know what? It was, without a doubt, it was something that helped me more than I could ever have explained to anybody. I think it helped me, my faith helped me to enjoy the game more. It helped me to appreciate my teammates more and the situations I was in. In hockey, it is a little different in the fact that it is, the whole sport itself is kind of predicated on the team first attitude, team first. It's always about the team. And that's kind of, I think that's one of the reasons why you might not see it as much coming out as you would in football and basketball and then some of the other sports, where our sport is much more, it's all about the group, it's all about the whole, and which I think is so important, because I mean, really, as a Christian, to recognize that we're part of something bigger than ourselves and to put others first gives you such a huge advantage, I think, in really understanding the mentality of a hockey player. And I think that's so important. But as I got older in the game and was able to get more involved and to see what HMI and what some of the chapel program started to get going towards the end of my career. Mike Gartner had a huge impact on me when he was here. He was here for my second and third year in the league. He was with the Coyotes, and he had a chapel. He had brought in a chaplain and kind of got that going, and that was big for me. And it was something that I sure appreciated. And now to see it as it's becoming more and more. Yeah. It's really hard though, because as athletes, it's funny because. I think that as an athlete, if you're a Christian, then most Christians are like, well, then you should be kind of like Tim Tebow, and every time you do something, take a knee and point to God and do. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not who some people are. Yeah. And that's not, and the thing that I think is more important than anything as a Christian athlete is to be yourself, because you were created by God specially to be who you are. And you don't have to, every time you score, give this huge sermon, but at the same time, in the way that you act, in the way that you treat people, in the way that you are, I think you're having just as big an influence. And I think that's important. And that's something that you have to guard against, maybe hiding it too much, but at the same time, staying authentic to who you are.
Yeah, I think that's really good encouragement for a lot of people listening. Who are some of the guys, you mentioned Mike Gardner, but who are some of the guys maybe in the NHL that were able to encourage you in your faith? Some teammates or maybe, chaplains and different people who were able to encourage you as you kind of went through your long career?
We had Jeff Farrar here at the beginning of my career, and as a chaplain, he was the best. He was a big part of our lives, and he just a guy that Mike Gardner brought in for a long time and just kind of came alongside and helped me out personally so much and was there for our family and for me, and somebody that I admired and appreciated so much. And then after him, I did it for a little bit on my own, which was good, but it probably wasn't, I felt that I probably could have, I needed someone with a little bit more depth than I had. As much as I could relate to the players, it was still important that we had somebody and we brought in a guy named Tyler Johnson, who's become a huge, huge influence on my life, and somebody that has been an incredible help to me. And then the players around the league, having a guy like Mike Fisher and I kind of hit it off and got along well, and were able to kind of, we played in a couple teams together, and we've kind of always stayed as pretty good friends. And it was just good to have someone that you could bounce different things off. Jerome and Tyson Nash are guys that I grew up playing with, that we've kind of had the ability to talk off and on about different things. A guy like Mike Smith was someone that I was able to bounce things off. Those are teammates that I played with that were able to just help you out and hold you accountable. A guy like Kurt Sauer was here. He helped. And you know what? It's all around my career, I had incredible guys that were able to come alongside and through either just asking questions of me or of me talking to them and I'm asking questions of them, really helped me with my just walk. And it sometimes wasn't even as much as just having someone that would listen. And the hockey players are genuine good men. And I'm pretty grateful for everyone that I got to play with.
Yeah, I agree completely. Most of the hockey players, if not all of them, that I've met and had a chance to talk to and even interview on this show have been fantastic and so willing, so cordial, so nice, so kind. And it's nice to see that and awesome to see that. As we wind down, let me ask you a couple more questions here. Your number was retired, number 19, on February 24th, 2019, before a game against the current Winnipeg Jets, ironically. What was that experience like? That must have been such a fantastic experience.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It kind of felt almost like a eulogy, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
I felt like I was supposed to go away and die or something at the end of it, but it was one of those things that was, I'm not going to lie. It was, if you ever had the experience of that, it's pretty special. Having my teammates and my family, my wife and my kids and my parents on the ice, it was pretty surreal and nothing that I would have ever dreamed of or thought might happen. But I just had an absolute blast doing that, and was very, very humbled by the whole thing and appreciative of it. Looking back over my career and kind of going through different things, understanding that, holy man, God had a plan for me and He had His hand in my life the whole time. And that was one of the more eye-opening and thought kind of reflecting moments when I was sitting thinking about everything that God had given me and put in my life from my wife. And she's amazing. I have 4 of the most amazing kids. They're awesome, and they love each other and they love our family and they love God. And I'm so incredibly grateful because I was gone a lot, and my wife kind of held the fort down for us, and then my family, my parents and my brother and sister and their families. It was my in-laws. I was just overwhelmed by everything that how much I'd been given and how much I know one thing, I definitely didn't earn any of it. I was given it, and I was pretty grateful and thankful for it all. Yeah,
that's such a cool experience. Now, I know lastly, before we let you go, a couple more questions. You're doing some work now with the NHL, Senior Advisor of Hockey Operations. Can you just share a little bit about what that role entails now that you're retired and helping out and serving with the NHL?
It's just I get the opportunity to be involved with the league. I work with a great group of guys. Colin Campbell is kind of the head of our kind of the league, and he would kind of be like the general manager of the entire league. And Chris King, Rob Pasma, Mike Murphy, Kay Whitmore, and myself, and then Steve Walkham. We kind of work together, and it's a great group of guys that we get to kind of deal with the officiating, deal with the outdoor game, the All-Star game. The rules of the game, different things that go on through just the hockey management of the league. And that's something that getting to see the business side of the game's been great. I've enjoyed it. And being part of that group, which feels like a team, was huge. As I mentioned earlier, when you fly somewhere by yourself, it does feel a little bit awkward still. Yeah. But when I know I'm landing and I'm going to see those guys, it kind of gives me like, oh, I'm heading to my team. And that's something that I feel good about and I'm thankful for.
I love that. Last question, Shane. This has been great. Thanks so much for being here on the show. This is a question we ask all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. What's the great lesson the Lord has been showing you recently? I know God teaches us something new every day, it feels like. So what's He been showing you? What's He been teaching you in the season of life that you're in right now? What's the Lord been showing you?
Oh, that that he is the truth. And and it sounds so simple, and it sounds so, but as I've kind of went through the last little bit, for a long time, I felt like I kind of had to guard the truth and protect the truth.
Right.
But if it is really true, then there is a freedom in it, and challenge it, question it, do whatever you want with it, because it's true. And there is such a freedom that came from that, and understanding that, I'm not responsible to guard the truth. I'm just responsible to look for it, search for it, want it, get it, do everything I can, because the truth of his love for us and all of that, it's just true. And I don't know how else to explain it other than it's true. And it's not a religious thing, even though obviously it's a big part. It's just true. And when you can really, you can't really argue with truth. I mean, when it is what it is. And I know that's so cliche-ish and so kind of abstract-y, but man, is it settling in on me, the fact that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And that is, we all want to search for it. We're all trying to find it. And the truth is just, it is what it is. And, and I've found so much peace in that in the last little bit of being like, man, I'm just going to keep searching for that and looking for the truth. And now that I've found it, I'm going to hold on to it.
So good. He is Shane Doan, longtime NHL player with the Winnipeg Jets, one season, then turned on to the Coyotes with Phoenix and Arizona. 21 NHL seasons, two-time NHL All-Star, is number 19, retired by the Coyotes in February of 2019. Shane, thanks so much for being here, for sharing your story, your heart. This has been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll get you back on again sometime. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Would love to. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
That's great stuff there from Shane Doan. 21 years in the NHL as a player with the Winnipeg Jets for a season, and then longtime Phoenix and Arizona Coyote Shane Doan holds all sorts of records. When you go to the record book of the Coyotes, Shane Doan's at the top with games played, with career points, with career goals. He's a legend, and he's been around for a long time, and now he's doing great work with the NHL as a senior advisor of hockey operations. Really enjoyed hearing Shane Doan share his story with us here at Sports Spectrum. We want to thank our sponsors, IJM International Justice Mission. You can check out the website, ijm.org/TF, and helping you and I get involved in fighting to end slavery in our lifetime. Many thanks to IJM, many thanks to Shane Doan, and many thanks to you for listening. We really do appreciate it. Want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content, which you can find, including a daily devotional, articles, and every single podcast episode. You can also hit us up on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and like us there, all sorts of content, and share this podcast. Let some people know that you heard Shane's story here on Sports Spectrum through your social media channels, and help get the word out on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. See you soon.